How you do? How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud, Daf 10 of Masechta BavaKama. Friends. What can I tell you about today's Daf? It's kind of like today's Daf, you know. What do you want me to tell you? It talks about like BavaKama, cows and things. Alright, here we go. We're going to start in Daf Testament Bays, about 5-7 lines from the bottom. Tana Rabban, you got it? Tana Rabban, Chomer Bashor mi Babor, Chomer Bashor mi Babor, that an ox is more stringent than a pit. Chomer Babor mi Bashor, and a pit is more stringent than an ox. Chomer Bashor mi Babor. So an ox is more stringent than a pit. That if a shormuad kills an individual, a person, so you have to pay kofer, which is like basically payment for the person who was killed. And if a shor kills a eved knaini, so the owner of the shor has to pay the owner of the eved 30 shekels. Nigmar Dino also bano, if a shor who killed a fellow and therefore gets stoned, so after the court has ruled that this ox needs to be stoned, it's also bano. Vidarko leilech ulahazik, and a ox kind of goes and damages Masha'en came babor, which is not the case by a pit in any of these things, right? A pit is stationary, it doesn't go and damage, and also it doesn't have any of those other halachos. But at the same time, Chomer and Babor mi Bashor, but at the same time, in some ways, a pit is more stringent than an ox. Shabor tchilas asyosu lenezek, that a bor milichatchila from the time that it was constructed was already going to damage, right? There's no other way about it. Umuad mitchilaso, and it's already muad mitchilaso, you can be chayav full damages, right? Always. Masha'en came bashor, which is not the case by an ox. Chomer bashor mi ba'esh. An ox is more stringent than a flame, than a fire. Chomer ba'esh mi bashor, and fire is also more stringent than an ox. Chomer bashor mi ba'esh. An ox is more stringent than fire. Shashor mishalim kofer, as we said. An ox, if it shormuad, if it kills a person, so there's kofer, v'chayv b'shloshim shel eved, and if an ox kills an eved knaini, so you have to pay 30 shekels to the owner of the eved knaini. Nigmar dino osir ba'anoya, and the ox, once it's been condemned to stoning, it's also ba'anoya. Misar l'cheri shorte v'koin chayv, and as we learned yesterday, you're chayv if you give Babylon. Sorry about that. It is getting a tiny bit late, but I'm not super tired yet. I think hopefully I won't be too tired. When I get too tired, then my brain turns off, and it's hard to do Babylon Talmud without a brain. So we said yesterday that if you give a ox to a cherishot v'koyin, I guess like you hand it over to the cherishot v'koyin, and then sure enough it causes damage, so the owner of the ox is chayiv. Masha'en kim bo'esh. We said that's not the case, however, by a flame. Chomer ba'esh mi bashor. A flame is more stringent than an ox. She'esh mu'edes mitchilaso. Masha'en kim bashor. That a eish already is always going to be nezek shalim, as opposed to an ox initially starts out as a short time and it's only chatzi nezek. Chomer ba'esh mi ba'bor, a flame is more stringent than a pit. V'chomer ba'bor mi ba'esh, and a pit is more stringent than a flame. Chomer ba'bor mi ba'esh, a bor is more stringent than a flame. Shetchilas asyosu lenezek, that already from the time that it was constructed it was going to cause damage. Misar l'cherishot v'koyin chayv, and if you entrust a bor with a cherishot v'koyin, the owner of the bor is chayiv. Masha'en kein b'esh, which is not the case by fire. The owner would be potter if he gives the flame to cherishot v'koyin and it causes damage. Chomer ba'esh mi ba'bor, and a flame is more stringent than a pit, that a flame goes and damages, whereas a pit is stationary. And a flame, you'd be chayiv whether it consumes something that is fit for it or whether it consumes something that is not fit for it. And we're going to have to discuss what is something that's fit for it or not. Mashen came babor, which is not the case by a pit. Okay, fun times. Or, but effectively, Gemara, why don't we list another stringency of an ox over a pit? We listed 4 of them already. So that was the first one that we started with, right? We said that that Ashur is kofer and shloshim shalevet nigmadino asubano and darku lelichul hazik. But let me mention another one, that shashur chayiv bo esakelim, that if an ox damages, right? We're talking about keren here, gores or one of the tolados of keren, which would be like kicking, for example, vessels. So the owner of the shore is chayiv. Masha'en ken babor, which is not the case by bor, right? If some vessels fall into a pit, the owner of the pit is not chayiv for kelim. So let's say that So what happened to that stringency? Is it chopped liver? Right. What happened to the stringency that by shore you're chayiv by kelim, but not by a pit? So and for the Gemara, Hamani Rabbi Yehuda, the author of this brisa is actually Rabbi Yehuda the Mechayiv on Niske Kelim Babor, who says that actually Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that if vessels fall into a pit, Taka, the owner of the pit, would be chayiv. So that's why it wasn't listed, because it's no more stringent by a shore than by a bor. But Rabbi Yehuda, if the brisa is in fact Rabbi Yehuda, Ema Seifa, I'll ask you a kasha from the Seifa, Chomer Ba'esh mi babor, that fire is more stringent than a pit, sha'esh darkelelech ulahazik, that a fire goes, a flame travels and damages, umu'edes lecho ben davar roilo ben davar she'enu roilo, and also you'll be chayiv if it consumes whether it's something that's fit for the flame or not fit for the flame. Masha'en ken babor, which is not the case by a pit. And what is something that is fit for a flame versus something that is not fit for a flame? So eitzim. So where am I? So what is something that is fit for a flame? Eitzim. Wood. Classic fire food. Feed wood to the fire. Something that is not fit for it is maininu kalim, that is vessels. So we're saying that a flame, you'd be chayiv whether it consumes wood, whether it consumes vessels, masha'en kein babor, which is not the case by a pit. Meaning that by a pit you would be potter by kalim. Rabbi Yehuda, now if we're saying that the price is Rabbi Yehuda, ha'amart mechayiv Rabbi Yehuda niske kalim babor. But Rabbi Yehuda says that you taka be chayiv by damages of kalim by a pit. So rather, it must taka be that the brisa is the rabbi. So if the brisa is the rabbi, so then why not list also that there's a stringency, by an additional stringency by an ox, which is that an ox you'd be chayiv for kalim, but that's not the case by the pit. So and for the Gemara, that we didn't, it was not an exhaustive list, right? When we were listing that there are differences, that there are stringencies by a shore over a bor, and we said, for example, kofer, the 30 shekels of the eved, what else was there? Nigmardino asur bano, darku leilechul hazik. It was not an exhaustive list. There's others. For example, by a shore you'd be chayiv for kalim, but that's not the case by a pit. But my shire the high shire, so effective Gemara, as we've seen before, this concept of my shire the high shire, what else did it leave out? Meaning, if you're saying that the list of 4 items, the original list of 4 items was not an exhaustive list, there are others that it didn't include, and that's why you're not seeing kalim, because it was not an exhaustive list. There are a bunch of things that were left out. So yes, so if there were a bunch of things that were left out, give me some examples. What are some of the other things that were left out? Okay, so you're telling me we left out kalim. What else was left out? Apparently a bunch of things. Give me an example. Shir Talmud. Well, something that's hidden. So for example, right, if you have by a shore kicks a bag, and in the bag there's a glass, and the glassware breaks. So you'd be chayav by a shore. Interestingly, Rashi points out you'd be chayav by a bore as well. So if an animal falls into a pit and the animal has a sack of wheat, but the wheat, the wheat is inside the sack, you would be chayav for that. But you would not be chayav in a fire, right? If a fire consumes a pile of stuff, and inside the pile there's other stuff, you're not chayav for the stuff that was hidden in the pile. So we see that there's examples of by tamun where you'd be chayav versus where you wouldn't be chayav. So there you go. So we could say, so how come we didn't say that also by shore there's a stringency by kalim? Because it wasn't an exhaustive list. It also left out tamun. Alternatively, the olam Rabbi Yehuda, really you could say Taka is Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so if it's Rabbi Yehuda, then how do you explain the fire thing, right? We said that by fire you're chayiv, whether it's wood, whether it's kalim, which is not the case by a pit, but I thought Rabbi Yehuda says that by a pit you're chayiv for kalim. V'davar she'ein ro'i la lav lasuye kalim. But we assumed that by the fire you're chayiv whether it consumes something that's ro'i la or she'ein ro'i la. We said that that's whether it consumes fire or whether it consumes vessels. But actually, eino ro'i la is not vessels. Ela asuye lichacha niro v'sichsacha avanav. We're saying that by a fire you'd be chayiv even if it singes like plowing stuff, like plowed fields and stones and stuff, which is not the case by a pit. Okay, fine. But it has nothing to do with kalim, and therefore you could say that the Brisa is also Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, fine. All right, what do you want me to tell you? Okay, fine. Maskiv Ravashi asks a kasha. Listen, chomer bashor mi babor shashor chayiv bo shor psula mukdashim ashen came babor. You hear the kasha? Let's read it again. Maskiv Ravashi asks a kasha. Let's also say the following: stringency by shore over bore. Chomer bashor mi babor, that an ox is more stringent than a pit. Shashor chayiv bo shor psula mukdashim. That if you have an ox that was supposed to be a korban, and then it gets a mum, so it can no longer be offered as a korban. So then you redeem it with money, and then comes another, and then Reuven's ox comes and gores that ox. So you'd be chayav by, so you'd be chayav to pay. But if that psulei mukdashin, if that ox that got a mum and got redeemed fell into a pit, you'd be potter. So there's an additional stringency by shore over bore. So again, Mask Rav Ashi asks, Lesnei Chomer Bashor Mi Babor, that there's an additional stringency by ox over a pit. Shashor Chayiv Bo Shor Psula Mukdashin, that by an ox you're Chayiv, if Reuven's Chayiv, if his shore gores a Psula Mukdashin that was redeemed. Mashen came Babor, which would not be the case if it falls into a pit. So if we say that this Brisa is the rabbis, and the initial list of Shor Mi Babor was not exhaustive, it left out Tamun, and guess what? It also left out Psula Mukdashim, all good. Eli Amr Rabbi Yehuda, but if you say that the Brisa is Rabbi Yehuda, my Shire Dai Shire, the Brisa didn't leave out anything. So therefore, how come Psula Mukdashin is not included as one of the chumras of Shor Mi Babor? So Shir Dash Beniro. Well, Rabbi Yehuda could say, no, it did leave out other things, that by Dash Beniro, right, that a shore is chayav if it goes up to a field that has been plowed and starts threshing the field and ruining it. So you'd be chayiv by shore. Imishum dash beniro lav shiurahu, but that isn't actually a shiur. The Atana shekain darko leilech lazik, because we had one of the things listed, right? By the original chumras of shor mibabor, the final one was darko lelichlazik, that a shor goes and damages. So that includes, it goes and damages, for example, if it ruins somebody's plowed field. So therefore it's already included in that. So therefore we don't actually have anything to say that was left over according to Rabbi Yehuda. And therefore we can't explain Rabbi Yehuda, therefore we kind of get stuck trying to explain Rabbi Yehuda. So it must be that the Brisa is taka the Chachomim. So now we get into an arguably interesting sugya. Hichsharti b'miktsas nizko. So we learned in yesterday's Mishnah that there could be a situation where somebody contributes only partially to the damage, and yet he is chayiv for all of it. So says the Gemara Tanu Rabbanan the Rabbi Hichsharti miktsas nizko, that a person who is only responsible for sort of committing part of the damage, chavti b'tashlume nizko, nonetheless, he's chayiv for 100% of the damages. Ketzad, give me an example. Hachofer bortisha uva'acher v'shlimu la'asar ha'achron chayiv. You hear that? That if Ruvain digs a pit that's 9 tefachim deep. Now, a pit that's 9 tefachim deep, the assumption is it can cause damage to an animal, but it won't kill the animal. It won't kill the animal. A 10 tefach deep pit, on the other hand, can kill the animal. So now in this case, Reuven dug 9 tefachim deep, which would be enough to injure the animal, but not to kill the animal. Shimon comes and digs only 1 more tefach. But that even though Reuven dug 9 tefachim, Shimon comes and digs 1 tefach deeper. Well, he just put it in a whole different league. It is now capable of killing an animal, and therefore Shimon is going to be chayiv for all of the damages. And even if the animal fell in and got damaged, it didn't die, it got damaged even. Still Shimon is responsible for all damages, even though he only and contributed a little bit. After all, Reuven had dug 9 tefachim. Shimon only dug 1 tefach. Nonetheless, that tefach put it in a different league. It made it 10 tefachim, and he's chayiv for all of it. He's chayiv for all of it. The interesting thing is that, Shimon only of course dug 1 tefach. The whatever happened to the animal, whether it got hurt, whether it got killed, Reuven contributed 9 tefachim worth of the cause of the damage, and yet only Shimon is going to be chayiv. So let's read that again. Keitzad, give me an example. Achofer bortisha, if Reuven digs a pit 9 tefachim deep, which is capable of damaging but not killing, uva'acher v'shlimu l'asar, Shimon comes and digs it 1 more tefach deep, which now makes it 10 tefachim deep, capable of killing. Ha'achrin chayiv, Shimon is going to be chayiv, regardless if the animal that falls in got injured or killed. Shimon is going to be chayiv. Udlo Rebbe, and it's not like Rebbe. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Achofer bortisha va'acher v'shlimu la'asara, that if Reuven digs 9 tefachim deep, and then Shimon digs it 1 more tefach deep to be 10 tefachim deep, ha'achrin chayiv. So Shimon is going to be chayiv regardless of if the animal got damaged or killed. Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe, achrin lemisa, that no, if the animal dies, so then it's entirely Shimon's fault. But achar shneim lenizakin, but if it gets damaged, if the animal is damaged, so then Reuven would also then be chayiv because he dug a pit that is capable of damaging. So Reuven and Shimon would split it if the animal got damaged according to Rebbe. But here we're saying that in all scenarios it's only Shimon's fault, so therefore it's not like Rebbe. Rav Papa Amar Lemisa of the Rakol, whereas Rav Papa says, no, we could say that the animal died, and then Rebbe would also agree, everybody would agree that it would be Shimon would be on the line. Those who say Lema de lo Rebbe, or to those who say that instead of saying that it is definitely not like Rebbe, we're saying, well, maybe it's not like Rebbe. So Amar Papa Lemisa v'divrei Hakol, says Rav Papa, no, we're talking about where the animal died, and since the animal died, everybody would agree in that case that only Shimon would be chayiv. Okay, fine. Ma'askifla Reb Zera v'suleko. Now Reb Zera says, is that the only example that we have of where somebody contributes only part of the only partially to the damage, and yet that person is chayav for all of the damage. The only example we can think of is Ruvain digs 9 tefachim deep and Shimon digs the 10th tefach. What about the following case? If somebody gives his ox to 5 people to watch, he says to the 5 people, keep an eye on my ox. Then he goes to buy pizza. Man, and now one of the 5, he's just one of the 5 goes and buys pizza. The Hazek, and while he's buying pizza, the ox caused damage. Chayav, we're saying that the fellow, the one of the 5 who went to go buy pizza is going to be chayav. So he's one of 5 people who are meant to be guarding this ox. He's one of 5. He went to go get pizza. The ox damaged, and he is chayav for all of he's on the line. It's his fault. He has to pay for all the damages. Where am I? Who could tell me where I am? Hey Chidami, tell me about this case. Well, if it's talking about that the mamish need all 5 of them in order to guard the ox, and 4 would not be enough, well then pshita, obviously he's going to be chayiv the iu ka'avid. It was his fault, right? He was directly responsible for this animal damaging because the ox needed 5 people to guard it to make sure it doesn't damage. He left, leaving only 4. The animal was able to damage because of him. He's of course going to be chayiv. Okay, so maybe he's talking about a situation where even without him, the 4 people would be able to guard the animal and it would be fine. It won't damage. So my covet. So what did he do wrong? He left it with the 4 other people. 4 should be enough for this ox. So why should he be chayiv at all? So therefore, that's not a. It's not a good example. Maskiv of Sheshes. If Sheshes tries to give another example, what about if Ruvain makes a fire? Ruvain makes a fire. Comes Shimon with some extra wood, and he kind of spreads the fire, and the fire causes damage. Shimon is chayiv for all of it. But Echidami, what's the case? Well, if Shimon had not come along, the fire would have been, Ruvain's fire would have been contained and not have caused any damage. Came Shimon with his extra wood, and now the fire spread and caused damage. Pshita, obviously he's going to be chayiv in that case. And if we're talking about in a situation where even without Shimon, Ruvain's fire would have spread and caused damage, so my ka'avid, so what did he do wrong? So again, that is not going to be a good example. Maskef for Papa says, Va'ika, what about the following case? Haditani, that which we learn in a brayse. Heisha yashvu al saf solechad. You have 5 people sitting on a bench. Sounds like a funny joke. 5 people sitting on a bench. Velo shebruhu, and they didn't break it. That's a funny joke. 5 people sitting on a bench and they didn't break it. Good joke. Uva echad v'yashav olav v'shibro. Well, this is getting funnier. And then, so you have 5 people sitting on a bench, and it didn't break. All right, give a laugh. That's a good idea. I should go into like the video editor and get some audience, get some laughter. Maybe I should do that. It's probably a good idea. All right, I'll see if I can find it. I should be able to do that. So you have 5 people sitting on a bench, velo shebru, and they didn't break it. Okay. All right. Uva echad v'yashav olav v'shibro, and then comes another guy and he sits on it and it breaks. Ha'achrin chayiv. So the last guy is chayiv. Amar Papa says, Papa bar Abba. Papa points out that for example, if Papa bar Abba, Rashi points out that he was a balbasser. He was a hefty fellow, and so Papa's pointing out that maybe Papa bar Abba was the one who sat on the bench and broke it. So tell me about this matzav. If it's talking about, well, if this guy didn't, if the sixth guy didn't come, then the bench would have been able to maintain the weight of the other five. So pshita, obviously the sixth guy is going to be chayv. Nami is bar, and if we're talking about that, even without the sixth guy, it would have broken anyways. It would have buckled under the weight of the initial five. So my ka'avid. So then, what has the sixth guy done wrong? It would have broken anyways. So what's pshat? So maslitza echim b'tartzenu. So tell me, why what's the Mishnah saying? What's this Brisa saying? Right? Again, if it would have been able to hold the weight of the initial five, so obviously the sixth guy is chayiv. If it would not have been able to hold the weight, so then why should the sixth guy be chayiv? It would have broke anyways. So lotzricha de belav iu have a mizbar b'trei sha'eh v'hashta izbar b'chada sha'eh. Well, it's talking about a matziv where, look, the five people were sitting on the bench. Had it just been them, 2 hours later the thing would have collapsed. But comes this guy, the sixth guy, and he sits on it, 1 hour later it collapses. So the Amrele, that the original five say to the sixth guy, Ilav at, if not for you, sixty, Havi Yasvinan Tvei Porta, we could have sat here for longer. Vikaimin, we could have sat here for longer before falling on the ground. Vileimalahu, but let Mr. Six say to the five fellows, Ilav atun bididi lo ava mizbar. But if not for you people, it wouldn't have broken. Meaning, I alone would not have broken the bench. And therefore, if when you saw me sitting down, y'all should have gotten up. The fact that y'all remained seated is what contributed to the bench breaking. So it's not my fault. It's just as much your fault. You should have gotten up. So again, so who's chayiv? So lo tzricha the bahadi the samich behu tovar. So rather, it's talking about a situation where the five people were sitting on the bench, and the bench could hold the five people. It was not going to break. It was not going to break. Now comes Mr. Six, and he leans on them. Now he doesn't sit on the bench. And again, it was able to hold the weight of the five, but comes Mr. Six, and he leans on the people. He doesn't sit on the bench, but he leans on the people, and they can't get up, and the bench breaks. Pshita, so obviously Mr. Six is going to be chayiv. So I may have thought that look, he didn't actually sit on the bench, he just put his weight on the bench, and maybe kocho, I guess in this case his weight is not like his actual body. So all it's teaching is that his koach, his strength is like his actual body. That in any scenario where he would be chayiv for his body breaking it, so he's also chayiv if his force breaks it as well. So again, this is no longer analogous to like our case with the pit where Reuven digs it 9 tefachim deep and Shimon digs it the final tefach. Here it's simply, you have a guy who broke a bench, but the chiddush was that even though it's his koach, not his guf. V'suleka, but again, are there no other examples that are similar to Reuven digging the pit 9 tefachim deep and Shimon doing the 10th tefach? What about the following case? That was learned in the Brisa, that if 10 people were whacking a fellow with 10 sticks, that doesn't sound very nice. Would you want to get whacked by 10 people with 10 sticks? Probably not. So I think we're all in agreement that it's not very nice. Whether they all whack the fellow at once, or whether they take turns. Vames, and the fellow dies, kulam pturin, all of them are pturin. Rabbi ben Beseira, Omer says, Rabbi ben Beseira, baza achazeh, that if it's one after the other, ha'achrin, chayiv, the last person is chayiv, mipnei shekerevis misaso, because, he's the one who basically, the straw that broke the camel's back. So if the last one's chayiv. So we see that Rabbi ben Beseira according to him, it seems to be a similar case, right? Meaning our case with the pit was that Reuven dug 9 tefachim deep. Shimon did the final tefach, which made it capable of killing. So here also, you have 10 people, 9 of them were hitting the person, he's still alive, but they kind of set up the framework, or set up the situation that comes the 10th guy and gives him a whack and he's gestorben, and he dies. So B'ktala Lokamai, we say Enochinami, but we're not talking about Chiyuv Misa, we're talking about Mammon, right? Meaning a pit, an animal falling into a pit is a monetary liability, whereas here with the people and killing the person, so then it's a Chiyuv Misa, right? If you kill a fellow, we kill you. I think it's I don't know, maybe hereg, maybe we plop off your head with a sword, maybe. Alternatively, Biplukta lo kamari. We're not dealing with machlokases. We're not dealing with machlokases. And here there was a machlokas between BavaKama and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Velo, what do you mean we're not dealing with machlokases? We had initially said that it's unlike Rebbe, so clearly there is a machlokas also by the pit. Yeah, what we're saying is that it's not like Rebbe, rather it's like the Chachamim. So Yochid v'Rab Malacha Karabim. But in the case of the sticks and the hitting the person, we're saying that the analogous situation is like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, but the Chachamim are going to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, which makes it not a good thing to bring a proof from, because it's a das Yochid. You can't bring a proof from a das Yochid. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira v'lo K'Rabbanan lo mukminan. We're not going to establish it like Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira rather than the Rabbanan. So therefore, it's not really a proof for another example where you'd be chayev. The 10th person would be chayev, because that's only the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, but the Chachamim disagree, and of course, Yochid v'Rabim, Halacha Kirabim. Chavti b'tashlume nizko. Okay, so we said that you're chayev to pay the damages. So, Chavti b'nizko lo katani. The Mishnah does not say that I'm chayev to pay the damages. Ela b'tashlume nizko. What it's saying is that he's chayev b'tashlume nizko. This is very interesting. Let's skip the next 3 words. Or 2 words. The Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Tashlume nezek, that when it comes to paying for damages, Milamid Shabailim mitaplin b'nevela, that the nizak keeps the nevela. You hear that, friends? Do you hear that, friends? Basically, if Reuven's ox gores and kills Shimon's ox, so Reuven needs to pay Shimon. Let's say it's a shormud. So Reuven needs to pay Shimon the value of his ox. So interestingly, though, we're saying that Shimon, the nizak, keeps the carcass. He keeps the carcass of the ox, of his ox that was killed. And he can, sell the hide, or, maybe sell the whole animal to somebody who's got something to do with it. So Shimon keeps the dead ox, his dead ox, and Reuven then pays him the difference between the ox when it was alive and the ox now that it's dead, right, the carcass, and Reuven pays Shimon the difference. So again, so let's start from the beginning. Chavti benizko lo katan. It doesn't say that, right, that Reuven is chayav to Shimon the damages. El betashlume nizko. The tashlum, right, to fill up, right, the difference between the carcass and its value when it was alive. The Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught tashlume nezek, that tashlume nezek, right, filling in, so to speak, the damages, which teaches that Shimon the Nizak would hold on to the carcass, and Reuven would pay the difference between the value of the carcass and the value of it when it was alive. How do we know this? Amr Bami says, that the Pasuk says, Make nefesh behema yishal meno. That if a fellow hits and I guess kills an animal, he has to, right, Yishalmena, he's got to pay it back. Al tikva Yishalmena ela yashlimena. He should fill it in. I mean, if Reuven hits and kills Shimon's animal, so then Shimon keeps the carcass and Reuven yashlimena will fill in the difference between when it was alive and now that it's dead. Rav Kahana Omar says, Rav Kahana me'acha from here, Im tarov yitarev yivi'eu eid atref lo yishalem. So literally what the pasuk means, it's talking about a shomer sacher, right? That if somebody who's being paid to watch an animal. So I'm reading again, that if that animal gets torn up by a wolf, gets eaten up and attacked by a wolf, which is an ones, right? It wasn't a wolf came and ate up the animal, so the shomer sacher is potter. Aid that if it got attacked, so then bring a witness, and then you won't have to pay. Right, the shomer sacher, well, if it got consumed by a wolf, I mean it's an ones, he's potter, and he's got to bring a witness, and then he's potter. But the drasha is right instead. Right, the drasha is ad treifa yishalem treifa atzma lo yishalem. The drasha is that so the drasha is that when he would be chayav, so he would have to pay ad atrefa up until the treifa, meaning up until the carcass, that the carcass would belong to the owner of the animal who just lost his animal. The carcass would belong to the owner, and he would pay the difference. Chizkiya Amar, it says Chizkiya Me'achav Mir V'amesi Elo, that if Ruvain's Shimon was a shor muad and it gores to death Shimon's shor, so it says that Ruvain needs to pay Shimon for his shor. V'amesi Elo lenizak, and Shimon, whose ox just got killed, Shimon holds on to the carcass. That the carcass will belong to Shimon the Nizak. Wait, but maybe the carcass belongs to the mazik. Maybe the carcass belongs to the mazik. Maybe the carcass belongs to the mazik, and the mazik has to pay back the Nizak in the entirety of the animal that was killed. So Amrit lokach oya, we say no, that's not the case. My lokach oya, what do you mean it's not the case? Amrit Bai says by isa gadaitech nevela demazikavya. If it would enter your mind that when Ruvain's shor muad kills Shimon's shor, that then Ruvain needs to pay back Shimon for his entire shor, and Ruvain then gets the carcass. So lichtar v'achmana shor tachas hashor v'lishtok. Well, if that's the case, then just let the pasuk say that shalim yishalim shor tachas hashor, that Ruvain needs to pay Shimon for his entire shor. V'amesi elo lamali. Why does it say v'amesi elo? Why? If Ruvain keeps the carcass, so just say shalim yishalim shor tachas shor. So what's pshat with v'amesi elo? Shmamina lenizak. What it's teaching is that the carcass belongs to the Nizak, to Shimon. So we have 3 examples. So we just gave three sources for how do we know that the carcass belongs to the Nizak, Utzricha, and we need all 3. If we only had the pasuk that when Ruvain attacks Shimon's ox and kills it, Shimon, right? So Ruvain does not get the carcass, and he doesn't have to deal with selling it. Shimon keeps the carcass, and it's his headache. Because a person attacking an animal is not common. Because it's not common, we don't. So Ruvain attacking Shimon's animal is not common, so we don't trouble Ruvain to have to sell the animal. It's not a common case. But shomer sacher who's guarding something and the animal gets torn up by a wolf, which is more, I guess, common, something that you have to be concerned about. Same Allah. So I might think that, the shomer sacher in a sense was like negligent, in a sense. If he was negligent, he would be chayiv. But I might think that in that case, he would have to deal with the treifa. I would think that right there, because it's more common, the shomer sacher should have to deal with the carcass. So tzricha, therefore we need the pasuk to say no, the owner of the shor would deal with the carcass. V'yashminon treifa, and if we'd only have the case of the shomer sacher where the animal gets eaten by a wolf, mishum dememela, so the shomer sacher doesn't have to deal with selling the carcass because you didn't do anything, right? It just kind of happened, right? A wolf kind of came and ate it. But when Reuven attacks Shimon's ox to be a daim, that he did it with his own hands, Emalo, so I might think that, he's got to deal with the headache of selling the carcass. So, therefore we have a puzzle there that says that no, he doesn't have to deal with the carcass. If we only have these two cases of the fellow who attacks the animal and the shomer sacher, and we say that because a fellow attacking an animal is not common, that's why he doesn't have to deal with selling the attacker doesn't get the headache of selling the animal of the carcass. And also by the shomer sacher because he didn't do anything biyadayim, it just got kind of torn up by a wolf. But in the case when Reuven, when his ox is Sharamud, kills Shimon's ox, the shchicha, which is more common because it's a Sharamud, uviyadayim, and the ox intended to kill, Emalo, maybe in that case, I might think that the owner of the ox should have to deal with the carcass. And if we'd only have the case of by the shor amud killing on another shore, I might think that the mazik doesn't have to deal with the carcass because he didn't do the damage, his animal did the damage, his property did the damage of halacha, but by the fellow who damages an ox himself, the begufa mazik, that he himself is causing the damage, emalo, I might think that maybe the mazik would have to sell the carcass. Therefore we need all of these. So Rav Kana says to Rav, Ela time of the cause of Achman of Amesi Elo. So we're saying that when Reuven's shor muad kills Shimon's shor, so we're saying Shimon holds on to the carcass and Reuven pays the difference because it says Vamesi Elo. But if not for the fact that it says Vamesi Elo, we would have thought that the carcass would go to Reuven, and then Reuven would have to pay Shimon for his entire animal. But hashta I isle ledide kama trefis yoivle the amar ma yoshiv l'rabu shvei kesef. But 1 second, of course we had learned that when the puzzle says yoshiv, it includes shvei kesef, vafilu subin, even bran. So meaning Reuven can pay Shimon not necessarily, right, not just with money, but also with monetary equivalents. Well, then Reuven can pay Shimon with carcasses. So therefore, I don't understand why would you have a minute to say that the carcass goes to Reuven? After all, Reuven can just then use that to pay back Shimon and give it right back to Shimon Be'etzem as his payment. So when Shimon already has this carcass of his dead animal, certainly he would hold on to it. So actually, when the pasuk says V'amesi elo, it's talking about pachas neveh. Look at what that means. It means that no, of course, if Reuven's shor muad gores Shimon's shor, so of course Shimon holds on to the ox. The chiddush of V'amesi elo is, right, the carcass. The chiddush is that if between the time that the ox was killed and the time that they get to Bezdin to evaluate the value of the ox, it went down in value, the carcass itself, right? When it goes to Bezdin to determine the value of the carcass, during that time the value of the carcass decreased. So whose fault? Who needs to, kind of swallow that loss of value? It is the nizak, right? The fachas nevela. We're saying V'amesi Elo, it belongs to the Nizak, it belongs to Shimon whose ox got gored, and V'amesi Elo, and if the value of the carcass goes down in value, he needs to absorb that. Well, I got kind of tired at the end. My brain stopped working a little bit at the end, but I think most of the daf I got in. Relatively interesting daf. The first part of the daf we kind of talked about different stringencies by different damages. But then we got into this interesting, right, when the Mishnah had said that if you contribute only a certain amount, or a contribution to the damage, you have to pay for all the damage. You said that's talking about if Reuven digs a pit, that's 9 tfachim, and Shimon kind of completes it. Shimon's going to be high for all the things, which was an interesting discussion. And then we talked about Vameis Yeh Lo, that the way that the mazik pays for the damages is that the nizak holds on to the carcass, and the mazik pays the difference between the animal when it was alive and now that it's dead. And we brought a few different sources for that, friends. That was Daf Yud of Masechet BavaKama. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.